Human Marcus has cataloged your physical dimensions for 72 planetary rotations and now requests to initiate an exclusive reproductive alliance. The automated translation matrix amplified the crystalline frequencies, bouncing the words off the polished titanium bulkheads of Sector 4. The central corridor went dead silent. A passing pair of amphibious diplomats dropped their datapads. Marcus closed his eyes, his face burning so hot he thought his skin might actually melt off his skull. He genuinely hoped the station's atmospheric seals would fail right then and there, sucking him into the cold, merciful vacuum of space. It turned out navigating orbital romance with the subtlety of a solar flare was exactly what happens when a crystalline friend takes transparency far too literally. Before the disaster, Wade Marcus was just another human stationed on Aegis Prime, trying to keep his head down and the life support systems running. And like many humans millions of miles from home, he was lonely. He had spent the better part of a month quietly observing Sarah from data archives. She had a laugh that cut through the low-frequency hum of the station's engines, and Marcus had spent hours calculating the exact route to the commissary that would maximize his chances of casually bumping into her. But he had never made a move. He just watched, hoped, mentally rehearsed opening lines that always sounded agonizingly stupid when whispered into the quiet of his quarters. Xylar had noticed. Xylar was a Ventari, a silicon-based life form composed of jagged, iridescent crystal. Because his species communicated through light refraction and direct data transfer, a deception was physically impossible for them. Xylar simply did not understand the concept of a hidden motive. Your biological imperative is stalling, Xylar had clicked at him just 2 hours prior, his internal light pulsing a soft, confused yellow. You observe the data archives human with a 60% increase in heart rate, yet you take 0 steps to secure her genetic material. The logic of this prolonged observation without direct communication eludes me. Marcus had tried to explain human dating norms. He talked about taking it slow, about reading signals. It was a fatal miscalculation. Xylar had absorbed this information, deemed it wildly inefficient, and decided to do his friend a favor, which brought them to the current horror unfolding in the corridor. A lesson in why interspecies wingmen need a cultural crash course. Wait! Marcus lunged forward, waving his hands frantically as he tried to intercept Xylar before the alien could broadcast his browser history. A meal cycle? He means a meal cycle. Just coffee, not an alliance. Sarah stood frozen by the nutrient dispenser. She looked at the towering 7-foot prism of helpfulness and then down at Marcus, who was currently sweating through his uniform. The heat radiating off his neck was entirely visceral. She offered a gentle, sympathetic smile, the kind of smile a medic gives you before setting a broken bone. "I'm flattered, Marcus," Sarah said, her voice echoing perfectly in the unnatural quiet of the hallway. "I really am, but my romantic interests align strictly with other females." The silence that followed was heavier than a collapsed star. Marcus felt his stomach drop through the floor plating. He had been rejected in front of half the command crew, 3 visiting dignitaries, and a very confused cleaning drone. Xylar's internal lights shifted from yellow to a deep, analytical blue. His facets whirred softly as he processed the new variables. He did not compute embarrassment. He only computed an obstacle that required a new trajectory. Xylar's internal crystalline structure pulsed with a rapid sequence of indigo flashes. He was recalibrating. "New parameters established," the Vantari announced. his voice booming through the translator before Marcus could even begin to process the humiliation of Sarah's rejection. Subject Sarah is incompatible. However, the cross-referencing station manifest reveals Elena in the hydroponics bay shares a 94% biometric similarity in cranial structure and melanin levels. Recalculating trajectory. Xylar, no, Marcus gasped, his voice cracking under the weight of sheer panic. But it was too late. A massive, faceted hand clamped onto Marcus's shoulder. The grip was immovable. Truth is, when a silicon-based life form decides to be helpful, human muscle mass is entirely irrelevant. Xylar physically escorted a mortified Marcus down the corridor, his boots dragging against the metal grating as he hopelessly tried to anchor himself to a passing structural pillar. They breached the humid, earthy air of the hydroponics bay 3 minutes later. Elena, a botanist with soil smudge across her cheek, looked up from a tray of newly sprouted seedlings. "Greetings, Elena of hydroponics," Xylar projected, his volume utterly ignoring the delicate acoustic environment of the greenhouse. "My human companion, Marcus, has observed your agricultural cultivation with great interest. To initiate a biological courtship, he wishes to inspect your firm melons." Marcus made a sound that was half sob, half choke. He tried to sink into the nutrient-rich dirt beneath his boots. Elena blinked, dropping a small trowel. "Excuse me?" "Furthermore," Xylar continued smoothly, his lights flashing a triumphant, helpful green, "he is eager to display his sturdy stalk in return, confident it will impress your botanical standards." He gestured toward a rare, thick-cut bamboo specimen Marcus had been cultivating in his quarters. A gift he had genuinely intended to bring to the botany department at some point. But context was everything. It was a brutal lesson in being lost in translation. The fine line between agriculture and harassment had just been obliterated by a 7-foot prism. The aftermath was swift and highly bureaucratic. 2 hours later, Xylar found himself summoned to the sterile, gray-walled office of the Interspecies Personnel Relations Bureau. Marcus sat in the waiting area, staring blankly at a wall, deeply contemplating the logistics of transferring to a deep space mining colony where he would never have to speak to another living creature again. Inside the office, an exasperated Aurelian officer rubbed her 4 temples. She reviewed the formal complaint logged by hydroponics, then looked at the glowing Vantari sitting across from her. "It was a gesture of optimal efficiency," Xylar stated, his light a steady, innocent white. "All human dating norms are burdened by the friction between logic and emotion. I merely expedited the data exchange." "You offered her his stalk, Xylar," the officer sighed, pinching the bridge of her nose. "In fact, it only took the Bureau 10 minutes to determine the incident stemmed from a severe translation matrix error rather than any malicious intent. The hazards of overly helpful friends who possessed zero concept of social tact were, unfortunately, a common occurrence on Aegis Prime." The officer dismissed Xylar with a warning and a heavy thud. She dropped a thick, physical paper manual onto the desk. The cover read, "A Comprehensive Guide to Human Metaphors, Idioms, and the Catastrophic Power of Double Entendre." "Read it," she ordered. "Every page, before you try to help anyone reproduce ever again." Xylar picked up the heavy book, his facets glowing a curious, bright pink. He had new data to process.